Trucker Dump for September 30th, 2009, Episode 28. Please, oh please, give me the bypass.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com. Resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hello there, Todd McCann here. Today we're going to talk about a subject that's far from exciting, but is something that every trucker has to deal with: truck weights. So with that, I bring you, please, oh please, give me the bypass. Have you ever seen a long line of trucks pulling off the interstate and wondered what the heck was going on? Either they're heading into a weigh station, or the Tropicana tan bus is on the side of the road with a flat tire. Either way, it's the law to stop, isn't it? Weigh stations are set up by the DOT, that's the Department of Transportation, and are usually manned by state troopers and or vehicle enforcement officials. Their main purpose is to check vehicle weights, but they also do vehicle and driver inspections when the mood strikes them, which usually just so happens to be when you're behind schedule on a tight load. Also, I'm pretty sure some of them used to be biologists, because during these inspections, they seem to be looking for any molecules that are out of place. Weight limits in the U.S. are limited to 12,000 pounds on the steer axle, 34,000 pounds on the drive axles, and 34,000 on the trailer, or tandem axles. Add them together and you get a gross maximum weight of 80,000 pounds, or 40 tons. If the trailer has single axles instead of duals, 20,000 pounds is usually the limit for each axle. Special permits can be purchased for oversized loads. The weight of the vehicle itself determines how much freight you can haul. The typical company-owned truck-trailer combo that you see usually weighs in the 34,000 to 35,000 pound range. That leaves enough room for 45,000 to 46,000 pounds of freight. The trick is getting all that weight distributed well enough to avoid an overweight ticket. Truckers call this axling out. Bridge laws determine how you need to distribute your weight. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you to a detailed explanation and a cute little visual of the bridge law. In short, bridge laws determine how far your drive axles on the truck must be from the trailer axles to avoid damaging bridges. These laws vary from state to state, so you need to find out which state you'll be traveling through and then adjust your tandems to meet the minimum requirements for your trip. You can find these distances in a trucking road atlas, or sometimes the company provides them to the drivers. California has the shortest distance when it comes to bridge laws, coming in at 40 feet from kingpin, that's the knob on the trailer that hooks to the tractor, to the center of the rearmost axle. If you're going to axle out a heavy load going into California, it's a must to get most of the weight between your axles. I put some pictures on the website of the fifth wheel and the trailer sliding mechanism. Go to AboutTruckDriving.com, you can check those out. There are three basic ways to get your load to axle out. 1. Load the freight evenly. Most trailers nowadays are 53 feet long, but the weight of your freight determines how much of the 53 feet you can use. If you're hauling styrofoam coolers, you can load it from floor to ceiling all the way to the trailer doors. However, if you're loading only 9 5,000-pound coils of metal, you'd better space those suckers out to avoid being over the 34,000-pound axle limit. Learning how to position freight comes with experience, but in general, if you get a 45,000 to 46,000 pound load within the first 48 feet of trailer space, you can get it to axle out. Why do you need to leave 5 feet at the rear of the trailer empty? That's where bridge laws and our next method comes into play. 2. Slide your tandems. Now, if you really want to get a good idea how these next two steps are done, I'd suggest you head on over to AboutTruckDriving.com and click on the link for free stuff. In there you'll find a PDF. It's a little diagram telling you how to get your weight distributed evenly, how to slide your tandems and your fifth wheel, and how moving your trailer will affect all that. There will also be a link to the free stuff page in the show notes. There's also a short video on the written blog that will show you how this all works. Links to that in the show notes too. So back to it. Most trailers are built on a rail system that enables you to slide the trailer box independently from the frame. This is done by pulling a lever near the trailer axles or operating an air-powered switch, which in turn pulls 4 pins out of a sliding rail underneath the trailer box. You then lock your trailer brakes, release your tractor brakes, and start sliding your trailer along the rail system. When you get it where you think you want it, you release the lever under the trailer, jump back into the truck, and slide the trailer a few more inches until it locks into place. Number 3, slide your 5th wheel. This is the part of your tractor that hooks onto the trailer's kingpin. On some trucks, the 5th wheel is adjustable for fine-tuning an extremely heavy load. I'd rather be forced to watch reruns of General Hospital for days on end than slide a 5th wheel. They aren't used nearly as often as the trailer sliding system, and therefore are typically as cranky as the old lady down the street who smells like cat urine and mothballs. If you must do so, you slide the 5th wheel much like you would the trailer. However, you start by lowering the trailer's landing gear to the ground. This is usually necessary to take most of the weight off that stubborn little 5th wheel. You then lock the trailer brakes, release the 5th wheel pin, either manually or air-powered, and start sliding the 5th wheel by moving the tractor forward or backward. Now brace yourself before you start moving, because when and if it ever unlocks itself, it'll usually jar you hard enough to cause you to vomit up your spleen. So there you have it. But how do you know if you need to adjust your weight in the first place? Well, again, that mostly comes from experience. I feel pretty comfortable guessing where the tandem should be on loads under 40,000 pounds. However, if something looks fishy to my experienced eye, or a load is heavier or is already sealed, I simply slide them to where I think they need to be and head for the nearest truck stop with scales, which is most of the major truck stop chains. The first weigh will run you $8 to $10, depending on the truck stop. If you're over the 80,000 pound limit, you're probably going to be heading back to the shipper for reloading. If you're just overweight on one set of axles, you can pull off the scale, slide your tandems a bit, and reweigh for $1, as long as the reweigh is within 24 hours and it takes place at the same truck stop where you did your first weigh. If you can't get legal on all 3 axles, you're most likely headed back to get your load adjusted by the shipper. By the way, the majority of carriers reimburse the cost of scales. If not, save your receipts for tax time. Although you can get most loads to axle out with room to spare, every once in a while you'll encounter a load where the best you can do is 100 or 200 pounds overweight, either gross weight or on a particular axle. Before I head back to the shipper, I always call my company first. I've had numerous occasions where they told me to run with a load because some particular weigh station you'll be crossing will allow a little leeway. Now, don't ever try this without permission, and always get permission in writing through your satellite. If they won't give it to you in writing, refuse to haul it. Overweight tickets are notoriously expensive, and it'll be yours to pay if you can't prove you were told to run with it. Weigh stations are a pain in the wazoo, but unfortunately, they're a necessary pain in the wazoo. Luckily, some companies provide a wonderful little savior that sticks to your windshield. It's called a PrePass. Just as a toll pass allows you to roll past toll plazas, PrePass allows you to pass weigh stations, at least most of the time. And that's why I say, please, oh please, give me the bypass.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Well. Lucky me. It looks like I've been blessed with some people who decided to write in. Actually, I shouldn't be a smart aleck. I'm happy when anybody writes in. Let's see what we got this time around. These comments are about hauling HazMat, which, as I've said before, still shocks me to death that this is one of my most hit posts. I can't believe it. Anyway, Christy Kuppler writes in and says, I've had my HazMat since I got my CDL in 1996. Usually the most hazardous thing on my truck was the leftovers from my refrigerator. I may be driving over the road again very soon, and I'd like to know how you get your routes when you have a HazMat load. I happen to know about I-76 in Pennsylvania, and I remember wondering what other way was the driver supposed to go. I didn't know the alternate route for HazMat. Did your company route you? And that Route 6 through Loveland Pass sounds scary as all get-go. Not a road I would travel at night for the first time, and certainly not on snowy, icy roads. Great blog. Well, Christy, thanks. I'm glad you enjoy the blog. And I can't speak for everyone, but I've never had a company tell me which way to run with a HazMat load. In fact, I've actually had to call them to inform them their normal routing wouldn't work. The only way I know is to plan your trip in advance, which is something every trucker should be doing anyway. But how do you know which route to take? My only answer is experience. How'd you know about the HazMat tunnel restrictions on I-76 and Eisenhower Tunnel? I think you just have to learn that stuff. When in doubt, ask another trucker before you take off and get yourself in a pickle. As for Loveland Pass, been there, done that. Snow-packed roads and all, not fun. Some of those curves require a tractor-trailer to take both lanes. Let's just say that I was scared enough that if I had rolled the truck, I would have stuck to the seat without the use of a seatbelt. And for the record, I knew about the HazMat restrictions through Eisenhower Tunnel. I tried to get my company to route me down on I-40, but they told me to take my chances with the weather. Never again. Joe V writes in and says, "Greetings. I just stumbled upon this blog while doing a Google on HazMat restrictions. Today, I received my completed background check and soft copy of my CDL with my coveted X." That's the X you get for the HazMat. Woohoo! He goes on to say, "I've been driving since 2006. Not a long time by most standards. I'm looking forward to next week when I begin hauling HazMat loads. Is there any listing anywhere that's going to identify the restricted routes? Strange how birds of a feather seem to flock together. I know Christy from above on Twitter. I shall for certain be following the blog. Thanks." Well, thanks to you, Joe. I always appreciate the comment, and I always appreciate someone following the blog. And congratulations on your newly acquired HazMat endorsement. Hope you're working for a company that pays you a little extra just for having it, even when you're not under a HazMat load. That's a sweet deal right there. And lastly, NJ Catwoman writes in, who just happens to be Christy Kuppler. She wrote back in again. She's a good commenter. I like her. She writes in and says, "I got the inbox alert the other day regarding this blog," which is really weird because I don't know why you'd get it again if you already saw it. Anyway. As always, it was worth another read. I had also blogged about having to take my HazMat written test. I think I blogged about it back in 2007 or 2008. Here's a link if you'd like a giggle. I gotta tell you, people, there's a link to the show notes to this article, and it is funny. She writes a blog called The Lady Trucker Chronicles, and it's always funny. I highly suggest you click on that link, go over there and subscribe to her stuff. She doesn't write a lot, but when she does, it always cracks me up. Christy goes on to say, "As for routing, well, I had a HazMat load a few weeks ago. My company routed me up I-77. I saw no signs that said I could not take my oxygenated gas, fire extinguishers, through the tunnels on that route. Still, I pulled over to the shoulder before the tunnel. I had forgotten about those two dreaded tunnels. But saw nothing that said I couldn't go through, but my GPS unit was having a fit. You know, I did look at my atlas, saw nothing about hazardous carriers being forbidden on Route 77 in Virginia and West Virginia. Where do you find your information to route yourself, Todd? It would be very helpful for me to know. I don't often haul HazMat because, like you stated in your blog, average truckers like myself have very little knowledge of specific hazardous materials. So true. Thanks so much for another entertaining educational read." Well, thank you, NJ Catwoman, or Christy, or whatever we want to call you, Lady Trucker Chronicle. As some of you may have noticed that I've been dodging the question. Christy asked twice and Joe V asked once if there's a list of restricted HazMat routes. Well, to be honest with you, in my 13 years, I had never known of one. I'd never really needed one because I don't haul a lot of HazMat. So I just happen to know where tunnels are. But quite honestly, Christy's right. That 77, that one on I-77, it always surprises me when I go through there. I always forget the stinking things there. Luckily, I'm not hauling HazMat when I'm doing it. But anyway, this got me thinking, and I decided to give it some thought, try to figure out where there's a list, and I found one. It's awful, quite honestly. It'd be nice if it was a map with color coding and everything, but there's no such thing. And why? Because it's on the FMCSA website. Ugh, what an awful website, but it does have a lot of information. I've put a link to the show notes on the FMCSA website for HazMat. There's a lot of information about HazMat, and there's also a link on there for what they call, I think it's called a road registry, something like that. Anyway, it's pretty clear when you get over there. Click on that, and there's a big text file. It's just a listing of all the restricted areas in every single state. So what you're going to have to do if you're unfamiliar with the roads and where tunnels are and stuff like that, if you're new to the industry, you're just going to have to go to that site, mark out your route, and say, hey, I'm going through West Virginia, or is there anything I can't go through, any tunnels or anything, or any roads I can't be on? That's the only way I know how to tell you guys to do it. But anyway, at least there is a source for it. It's a crappy one, like I said, but at least there's a source. And lastly, Jess says, well-written rundown on moving HazMat. For the questions about routing around road restrictions, check out this article. And he puts a link to an article about GPS units. Well, I put that link in the show notes also. You can check that out. Basically, though, the way I feel about GPS units is you've got to have a trucking one. If you don't follow that stinking thing, because it's going to run you into low overpasses and HazMat restricted areas and roads that trucks aren't allowed on and all kinds of junk. If you use a truck one, you're better off, but I got to be honest with you, I still don't trust them. I guess it's better than nothing. But there's a link to an article about them anyway, if you're interested. So that about does it for this podcast. If you guys got comments of your own, you can send in written or audio comments, however you want to do it. Here's my contact info. So, have you ever got a ticket for being overweight? Tell us about it. Or did I miss something? Show everyone how clever you are by going to abouttruckdriving.com, typing TD028 into the search bar, and leaving your comments. Check out the pictures in the post while you're there. And of course, you should hit the shiny subscribe button if you haven't already. I always like to hear from you guys, so shoot me an email at truckerdump@gmail.com or give me a holla on Twitter where I'm at Todd McCann. That's 2 D's, 2 C's, and 2 N's. I still haven't reached 8 million iTunes reviews yet, so if you'd like to help with that, by all means, have at it. Thanks for listening. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way.